From the academic point of view, it is important for you to understand that all the tests that you study will not be measured in the same unit. When you talk about the components of physical fitness, your agility, your speed, your muscle endurance. So from the academic point of view also, it is important for you to know this test as RIKILI and Jones instead of senior citizen test. So majority of the times in the exam you won't get it as senior citizen test, rather you will get it as a RIKILI and Jones test. Hello, my name is Rohit. I take physical education on behalf of prep school by Vidhyaashram. In today's class, we will cover the third session of test and measurement in sports. Now in the previous sessions of the chapter, you saw the meaning and the relevance of test and measurements in sports. Why we should know about it and what is the relevance of that and importance about that. We studied about various motor developments and what is the relevance of motor development and how much it is relevant and how much it is important in a person's life. We saw motor development tests, we saw the concept of that, and we saw various other aspects of that particular topic. And now, in this session, what all things we will be covering, let's have a quick look at it. So we will be studying about RIKILI and Jones test, which is a senior citizen fitness test. Now, all the motor fitness tests, all the physical fitness tests that we studied in the previous sessions of the chapter, that was more focused on the youth and children. But in this session of the chapter, we will be studying about physical fitness tests for senior citizens, that is named as RIKILI and Jones test. Now when we talk about senior citizens, what age group are we talking about? We are talking about the age group above 60. So people who are above 60, their fitness, how do we measure that? We will learn from this particular test. So without further delay, let's jump into the RIKILI and Jones test and see what all sub-items and sub-tests are there which determines the fitness of senior citizens. So what is the first test under RIKILI and Jones test? Under RIKILI and Jones test, the first test is chair stand test, in which a senior citizen is made to sit on the chair and is made to get up. So he has to do the cycle of getting up and sitting down on the chair, and he has to continue doing that for 30 seconds, in which the measurement will be taken how many times the subject, in this case the senior citizen subject, was able to get up and sit down during the course of 30 seconds. So that count will be taken as that person's score. Okay? So the first test that we have under senior citizen test, that is RIKILI and Jones test, is chair stand test. Now before we get into the procedure and how it is done, let's get into understanding what is the purpose of this test. Why this test is conducted, what is the relevance of that. Now the purpose of chair stand test under senior citizens fitness test is that it measures the lower body strength. Okay, what it does, it measures the lower body strength of a senior citizen. Now lower body strength, that is the lower torso strength, is very important to do different kind of regular day routine activities like climbing the stairs, like climbing the uphill mountains, or doing the regular activities, or any kind of activities where you have to use your lower torso or lower limb muscle strength. There your lower torso is involved. So the strength of that is tested by conducting chair stand test under senior citizen test, that is RIKILI and Jones test. So the first test that we have under RIKILI and Jones test is what? That is chair stand test. Now let's get into what all equipments do we require to conduct that. You need a chair that is at least 44 centimeter high from the ground. That means the place where you sit, the chair that you are using to conduct this test, that should be 44 centimeters high. That means the chair that you are going to conduct this test on should be 44 centimeters high minimum. In this test, the subject, in this case which is a senior citizen subject, is made to sit on a 44 centimeter high chair, and he is asked to get up and sit down, get up and sit down, and the cycle goes for almost 30 seconds. So how the procedure takes place? For 30 seconds this test is conducted, where the senior citizen subject is asked to get up and sit down as fast as you can, and he is given the time of 30 seconds. In that, how many times he can get up and he can sit down, that count will be taken, and that's how the scoring of this test is done. Now how is the scoring of the test is done? Like I said, the score is total number of completed chair stands during the given 30 second of time. Okay, so 30-second time will be given to the senior citizen subject, and the subject has to get up and sit down within the 30 seconds, how much ever cycles he can, and that will be the score of that subject. So that is the first test under RIKILI and Jones, which is again known as the senior citizen test. So what was the purpose of this test once again? What was the purpose of this test? The purpose of the test was to measure the lower torso or the lower body strength of a person. In this case, like I again said, this is a senior citizens test. Now many of you may have this funny thing in the mind that this is not a big deal, this test is not a big deal, that getting up from the chair and sitting down, again getting up from the chair and sitting down, I could do this a million times, you may say that. Now keep this in mind that this test is not for the youth who are full energetic and there is no problem with their muscular part of the body or the anatomical part of the body. This is made for senior citizens. Now over the period of time, as they grow older, as aging take place, what happens? Lot of bones related issues comes over, okay? Lot of bones related issues comes over or takes over, like osteoporosis. So the density of the bone and a lot of other things happens when you grow old. So keeping in mind their physical capability, this test was designed. So obviously when this test was made or when this test was designed, the senior citizens were kept in mind. It was made particularly for senior citizens, okay? So many other things that you will learn in this test will be very easy if you do at this age, but at the same time senior citizens may find it little tough, and that toughness, how much tough or how much fatigue they feel when they do this kind of test or when they do senior citizen or RIKILI and John's test, that time it will determine, that fatigueness itself will determine how much fit that senior citizen is. Okay, so having given a brief glimpse and brief bird's eye view on the whole concept of the test, let's move on to the second item in RIKILI and John's, that is arm curl test. Now what do you mean by arm curl test and what is the purpose of that? Second test is what? Arm curl test. The purpose of the test is to assess the upper body strength and endurance which is required for performing household and other activities involving lifting and carrying things. Okay, so what is the main purpose of arm curl test? The main purpose of arm curl test is to measure the upper body strength. Okay, the upper body strength, we are talking about the upper torso, our abdominal strength, our arm strength, our shoulder strength, our back muscle strength. All those things are counted under the upper body strength. So when you talk about arm curl test, how do you do that? Now before getting into the procedure of arm curl test, let's get into what all things are required to conduct an arm curl test. So the equipments that are required to conduct the arm curl test are a 5-pound weight for women and a 8-pound weight for men. Okay, we are talking about two different category of weights. We are talking about 5-pound weight dumbbell and we are talking about 8-pound weight dumbbell. So both of them are required again to conduct the test, depending on whom you are conducting the test on. If the subject is a female, you have to use a 5-pound dumbbell, and if the subject is a male, you have to use a 8-pound dumbbell. Now how does this test happen? So basically, if you have ever been to gym or if you have ever worked out, you may know about dumbbells, right, which you use to improve or develop your biceps and different other muscles in your body. So the same dumbbell you can use to conduct the test. Now remember, kgs are different from pounds. Now generally in our country we use more of a kg based metric system, but in United States they use more of a pounds. Since this test was developed from United States and this whole program of RIKILI and John's was developed from United States, the test itself states, the benchmark itself states, the unit that they use is in pounds. That is 5 pounds for women and 8 pounds for men. So the senior citizen male, then 8 pounds dumbbell will be given to him, and if the senior citizen subject is a female, then 5 pounds dumbbell will be given to them. Okay, so what is the purpose? Now the purpose here is not to measure how heavy, how much weight a senior citizen can pick up or how much weight a senior citizen can lift. The whole purpose here is to check whether the senior citizen is able to curl their arm while doing it properly without feeling any kind of fatigueness or any kind of bone related problems. Now, how do you do that? So basically, when you go to gym, you take the dumbbell and then you flex it, right? And you lift it up. When you lift it up, automatically your biceps and your wrist muscles are involved there, right? So when the tension is put on the muscles, you build the body, right? You build the muscles around that place and the muscles around that region becomes more stiff, and that's how you develop the body. But in case of arm curl test, that is not the purpose of the test. The arm curl test itself, the name itself states that the test is to test how much you can curl, how much that senior citizen is able to curl. So if you see from the side angle, of the subject, if the senior citizen is taking the dumbbell, suppose there is an 8-pound dumbbell in my hand. So when I lift When I lift it up, there is a joint, right? There is a joint over this section, so that joint is bending and I am able to curve my full arm up to its maximum limit. So is that the same case with the senior citizens? How much curl a senior citizen can do? That curl test is taken. Now again, when you talk about the arm curl test, the scoring of test is again taken by the total number of curls. Okay, so how many number of curls a person can do? So how many curls the senior citizen subject was able to do during the period of 30 seconds, that count will be taken as that person's score in the arm curl test. So you saw now in the two tests that we studied in RIKILI and Jones, at both stages the number of counts are taken. Now further you will see few more tests where you will see the measurement will be taken and some other tests, the weight and the timings will be taken. So if you see the whole picture of the test, all the sub-items in the test, all of them are not using the same unit. So from the exam point of view, from the studying point of view, from the academic point of view, it is important for you to understand that all the tests that you study will not be measured in the same unit. For some tests or some sub-items under some test, it will be measured in times, and some sub-items that you see will be measured in kgs and other units, okay, or pounds in or other weight related units. So all the tests, it will differ based on different test to test. So you have to keep that in mind. Now let's move on to our next test, chair, sit and reach test. So what is this test? Now how is this test done? Now again, before getting into the procedure of chair, sit and reach test, let's see what is the purpose of this test. The purpose is to assess the lower body flexibility. Now we are not talking about strength. As we saw in the earlier test under RIKILI and Jones, the strength was measured, right? In the first test that we studied, sit and stand, right? Standing test of the chair. In that we tested the lower body's strength, the lower body's power or endurance. Later in the arm curl test, we saw the upper body strength, right? Now here a stage came. Here a stage came in the whole RIKILI and Jones test, which is the third item test. In that we are studying about chair, sit and reach test. In this, the purpose of the test is to test the flexibility. Like we studied, what all are the different components of physical fitness? When you talk about the components of physical fitness, your agility, your speed, your muscle endurance, your stamina, your physical strength, your physiological strength, your anatomical strength, all together will come into play. And the flexibility also is one of the health related component that also has to be there in order to carry out your regular day-to-day activities. So when you're talking about regular day-to-day activities, a lot of activities, a lot of routine day-to-day activities will be there where the activity will demand flexibility from you. So if your body is not flexible enough and if you try to do any kind of extensive stretchful activity without the practice, what will happen? You may get sprain or you may get any kind of cramp. So to avoid those kind of situation, you have to keep doing physical fitness activity that will maintain your flexibility. Now coming back to the test, we were studying about chair, sit and reach test. Now after understanding the procedure of this test, you will understand the logic behind naming the test like that. Okay, so the purpose, like I said, what is the purpose of this test? The purpose of the test is to assess the lower body flexibility, which is again required for your regular day-to-day routine activity, like I said. Now what all equipments do you need? Obviously you need a ruler. So basically in this test the scoring will be more on a measurement basis rather on the weight based or count based. Then a chair with straight back and approximately 44 centimeter high. Okay, so a chair with straight back and approximately 44 centimeter high, just like the same chair that we used in the first test under RIKILI and Jones test. Even in this test you need a 44 centimeter high chair. That is a minimum requirement, and you need a ruler. Now how this test is done? So basically, how do you sit on a chair? When you sit on a chair, both of your hands will be on your armrest. But in this test, it is recommended not to have a chair with the armrest. Okay, so it is better if you have a chair without the armrest, and the height of the chair should be 44 centimeter high. So basically what you have to do is, you can see from the image over here, the subject is sitting on the chair and that subject is trying to bend down and reach towards the toes and is trying hard. So how much forward and how much that person is able to flex forward to touch the toe, that will show the flexibility of that person's lower body. Okay, so flexibility of lower body is measured again in the test by reaching out further. So the subject has to reach furthermore in front. Now he has to touch his toes, or he has to reach as forward as possible, trying to touch his toes and without bending. Now one more thing you have to keep in mind in this test is that the candidate or the subject on whom the test is being conducted he is not bending his knees while keeping his legs straight. So that's why it is important for you to test or assess this whole test that is going on from the side angle. So if you see from the side angle, you can see whether that person is bending his leg or not. So the bend, so the leg, the limb, the lower limb, the leg of the subject from the hip bone to his toes has to be in a straight line, okay? That person has to keep his leg straight, that person should not bend his knee, okay? Without bending the knee, that person should be able to bend down and reach his toes. And how much he is able to reach his toes, that is how the test is done. Now how is the measuring done? And you may ask the question, in that case what is the measurement done? From where you should take the measurement? Now in that case you may ask how the measurement is done for this test. Now like I said, you can see from the subject over here, the subject is sitting and is trying to reach his toe. So what you have to do, you have to see the difference between that person's hand reach and the toes. How much far away his hand is from the toe, okay? So suppose the subject's toe is here and his hand is here. So he is trying to reach as hard as he can forward as possible, right? As hard as he can, he is trying to reach and flex forward to touch his toe. Now he is not able to do that. So what is the difference between his hand and the toe? The difference of that has to be measured in centimeter or inches also you can take. In both the units you can take the measurement. That measurement itself should be written in minus. So basically the toe is taken as 0. So how much less space is remaining in between, okay? So how much little space is remaining, that will be written in minus. So for example, the hand has reached at this point and the toe is here. So basically around, I can see around 2 centimeter is there. So you can say minus 2 centimeter, okay? So minus 2 centimeter will be the score of the candidate who is doing the test. So depending on different candidates flexibility, and we are talking about senior citizens, so obviously they will have a tough time doing this test, unlike us who are energetic and who are more at our youth, we will be able to do that easily. But the point is, will the senior citizen will be able to do that? So the capability of that senior citizen subject, so the capability and ability of that senior citizen subject to reach forward and touch his feet or touch his toe, that will show the flexibility of his lower body, and that will give us the results, and that will be able to help us to determine the lower body's flexibility by doing the chair sit and reach test. Under which test we are studying about? We are studying about RIKILI and Jones test. Now keep in mind, many people will prefer to learn it as senior citizen test, but remember, RIKILI and Jones is the actual official name of this test. Just like we studied about Barrow test earlier in our second session, just like that in this session also we have to study it like RIKILI and Jones test, because the international name for this test is like that. So it is important for you to name the official name of that. So it is not just important for you to know on a regular basis, it's also from the academic point of view. So from the academic point of view also, it is important for you to know this test as RIKILI and Jones instead of senior citizen test, okay? So senior citizen test is a secondary name, the primary, the most important name is RIKILI and Jones test. Now hope you will keep this point in mind when you study and revise this chapter for your examination, or when you prepare this chapter for your examination. Having said that, let's move on to our next test item in RIKILI and Jones test, that is back scratch test. Now again, the naming of this test will again make sense as you understand the procedure and the relevance of the whole procedure and why we are doing that. Now before we jump into the procedure of the back scratch test, let's get into the purpose of back scratch test, why it is conducted. The test helps to assess the upper body flexibility. Now in the early test we studied about lower flexibility. In the early item, that is our sit and reach test, we assessed the person or the subject's lower flexibility, lower body flexibility. Now in this test, that is our back scratch test, we are trying to assess and determine the upper body flexibility of senior citizen subject in this case. Okay, so that's a purpose, that's a major purpose of this test. What are the equipments required? You just need a ruler to conduct this test. Okay, you just need a ruler to conduct this test. Now how it is conducted? Let's get to the procedure now. Now as you can see from the subject over here, the subject is trying to take his hand behind, both his hand behind, and he's trying to connect it, not from the front, from behind. So what is required for that? You need a very good flexibility to achieve that target. You need a very good flexibility in your body, or very good flexibility of your upper body to achieve that. So that will help us to determine the upper body flexibility of this subject that we are talking about. Okay, so what you have to do again? What you have to do again to conduct this test? The person again has to sit on the chair. The preferable chair, like I said, is 44 centimeter high. Okay. So how do you conduct this test? The subject is first made to sit on a chair, which is preferably what centimeters? How many centimeters? I told you already, right? We used the same chair in the previous test. What is it? 44 centimeters. So minimum the chair should be 44 centimeter high. You have to make this candidate or make the subject or senior citizen subject sit on that chair, and then you have to ask the candidate to take both of his hand behind, and he has to try to connect both of his hand, and that effort that he is taking and how much he reached, whether he is able to join his hand, whether some difference between both the hands is there, that will be the measurement that we will be taking. So like in the early sit and reach test we did, okay, we took the measurement in negative, right? We took the measurement in negative. So just like that itself, when you turn back, when you have to see behind, you have to see behind the back of the senior citizen whether that person is able to connect both of his arm or not. So if the person is able to connect both of his arm, the scoring should be written in 0. Like I said, like we did in sit and reach test, the person was trying to reach his toes. So as far as he reached, we took the measurement of that, and how much distance was remaining before he could actually test the toe. So that distance was taken as the measurement of that test. Just like that, in this also, you have to ask the candidate to reach behind and try to join his hand. So if he is able to hold or join his hands, then it will be 0, the measurement will be 0. And if that person or the subject is not able to hold his hand, then you have to see how much of centimeter gap is between both the hand, and that distance will be taken in centimeter or inches, and that will be the scoring for the test, and which will also determine the flexibility of his upper body. Okay, it will also help us to determine the flexibility of the upper body of the senior citizen subject we are conducting the test on. Okay, so having said that, hoping you understood this part of the test. So now let's move on to our next test under RIKILI and Jones, that is 8 feet up and go test. Okay, so once again, before getting into the meaning of the word or the test itself, let's get into the purpose of that. Why do we need to do that? What is the significance of that? Okay, why we have to conduct this test? This test is conducted to assess the coordination and agility in aged people. Okay, so this test is conducted to do what, or to test what? This test is conducted to test or assess or determine the coordination and agility in aged people, that is senior citizens. It is understood that it is for aged people since we are conducting the senior citizen test, but you have to keep that point also in the mind. Okay, so what is the purpose of this test? The purpose of the test is to check and measure the coordination, the neuromuscular coordination in aged people. Okay, so what all are the equipments that is required to conduct this test? You need a chair, obviously. What height? We already discussed about it. We are taking a 44 centimeter high chair minimum, okay, and a stopwatch, cone marker. Cone marker means, you might have seen this in the athletic events and in your sports days in your schools also. Cones are used to mark certain kind of marking or pitching in the ground. So the same cone you have to use. Measuring tape and an area without any kind of hindrances. Okay, so basically you need a chair, then you need a measuring tape. So if you have a good enough space, if you have a ground where much disturbance is not there, you have to conduct that test over there, and you need a chair and you need a marking cone. So basically what will happen, so as you can see over here from the image on this side, the subject is sitting on the chair and a marking cone is kept in front of him. So the subject has to now get up and he has to walk towards that cone, and he has to take a whole round around that marking cone, and then he has to come back and sit on the chair. So how much time did it took? How much time did it take to go around and sit back on the chair without any kind of fatigueness or any kind of problem? That time will be taken in this test. Okay, so like I explained earlier also, not every test under senior citizen test is having the same unit. So some tests will use scales, some tests will use counts, and some tests will use times. So this you have to keep in mind. Okay, so that is important. So 8 foot up and go test will measure the neuromuscular strength and neuromuscular capability of the senior citizen subject, and also it will test the agility of that person. So how the test is scored? The test is scored in timings, and the person is given 3 chances, out of which his best score will be taken and recorded. That's how 8 foot up and go test is conducted. So now let's move on to our last test item under RIKILI and Jones test, that is 6-minute walk test. Okay, so what is the purpose of 6-minute walk test? As the name suggests, The purpose of this test is to check the aerobic fitness of the aged person. So since we are doing the test on senior citizens, you have to keep in mind that we are talking about aged people. So what is the purpose of 6-minute walk test? The purpose of 6-minute walk test is to test and determine the aerobic fitness and aerobic endurance of an aged person. So what all equipments do you require? Obviously you need a measuring tape and a stopwatch. Okay, you need a measuring tape and a stopwatch to conduct this test. And apart from that, obviously you need a ground where marking is there. Okay, so in 6-minute walk test, you need a stopwatch, you need a measuring tape, and you need a ground to conduct the test. Stopwatch obviously to measure and to time the whole event of the test, and again measuring tape to measure how much that person traveled, or how much that person walked, or the subject walked in this 6 minutes. Okay, so that will show that person's agility and that person's speed, as well as it will also show that person's capacity and that person's fitness. So that is the purpose of conducting 6-minute walk test. And once again, how is the scoring done? The scoring is done based on the distance covered in 6 minutes. So how much distance did he cover in 6 minutes, that will be taken. So in this test, we are taking the measurement. So I hope you understood all the 6 different tests that we studied under RIKILI and John's test. And once again, what is the other name for that? The other name for that is senior citizen test. Like I said, the important name that you have to keep in mind is RIKILI and John's. So majority of the times in the exam you won't get it as senior citizen test, rather you will get it as a RIKILI and John's test. So you have to keep that in mind. Okay, so having said that, we'll wrap up today's session. So before signing off, I would like to recap what all things we did in today's session. We studied about RIKILI and John's test. Under that, 6 tests were there. What all tests were there? First test was chair stand test, where the senior citizen subject is supposed to get up and sit on the chair and continue the cycle of doing that for 30-second time. And how much counts the person was able to do that, that will be that person's score. After that, we studied about arm curl test, where the upper body strength was tested. Then we studied about sit and reach test, where the lower body flexibility was tested. Then we saw back scratch test, where the person's upper body flexibility is tested. And then we saw 8-foot up and go, where that person's neuromuscular coordination and agility was tested. And finally, we did 6-minute walk test, where again the endurance of that person, the stamina of that person, the aerobic capacity of that person was measured. So that was RIKILI and John's test. So I hope you understood all the details that we covered in today's topic, and everything is crystal clear to you. So by mistake or by any chance, if you have missed the first and second session of this chapter, I would recommend you go back and watch that session first, because you will be missing out a lot of topics from the chapter. For example, like motor fitness, like what is the importance of motor fitness, what is the relevance of motor fitness, what is the meaning of that, how do you measure motor fitness in youth. All those things will be missed out if you don't go and watch that. So I recommend you to go back and watch session 1 and session 2, and then come back and resume the session and see the session once more to understand the whole chapter and the relevance of that in physical education or in our life more better. Having said that, in the next session, we'll start off with a new chapter, a new session, a new topic of physical education. Until then, this is me Rohit, signing out. Until next time, goodbye.